All right. So they call it the go-go years for a reason, right? You can freely spend on things that you've always wanted. And to a certain extent, there's truth to that. But you got to be careful, right? You got to be careful about buying your vacation homes, antique cars, boats. All those things that you always wanted can be yours, but you got to be careful that you don't run out of money. It can be pretty dang easy to overspend in those first few years of retirement. But let's go ahead and take a look at some of these purchases that you may regret a little bit later. And the number one is a boat. A boat is if you've never had a boat, okay, if you've never had a boat is a very high maintenance piece of equipment unless you have somebody take care of it for you. And the other thing about a boat is it's generally something that takes a little bit of organization before you go out and enjoy on your boat. And you got to get other people who want to go with you. And it's a great experience to be out on the water, but also after a year or two, you may find that you're not going out on that boat near as much as you used to. And that can be a problem because you're making that payment on that boat, or maybe you bought it outright, but you're having to do all this maintenance on your boat and you're not using it. And it can really, if you're like me, it can be a real drag or a real downer because I look at it, or when I go by the lake and I say, oh, geez, we should be using that boat more. So I would say the number one, at least for me, is a boat. All right, the number two thing could be moving to a resort location, right? You want to move, say you lived up north your whole life, and man, I want to live in Florida. I want to live in California. So you move down and you move to a resort location. Well, the resort's for a reason. People are really nice to you as long as you're spending money and you're staying there and you're a tourist. But when you actually live there, it might not be as fulfilling as you think it would be. And it's going to be probably harder to make friends in a resort community than it was where you were living. And I don't know that. I haven't lived in a resort community, but I know when we go out and we go to resort communities, they're a lot of fun, but I'm not sure it's where I'd want to spend, year after year after year. And especially, I would suggest, spending some time down there in the off season and see what it's like. All right, so I'd like to pause the video for a minute and ask you to go down into the comments and leave me a comment. Let me know where you're from and let me know what you think could be a very good purchase for you in your retirement. What are you thinking about? And number three that I would be careful of is an RV. Now, don't get me wrong. My wife and I absolutely love our small motorhome we bought, and we love traveling in it, and it's a great mode of transportation. But I will say, with the rising cost of fuel and the rising cost of RV spaces, take a look at these Airbnbs, because if it's just two of you going, you can get an Airbnb or a Vrbo or something like that relatively cheap as compared to paying $60, $70 a night to park your RV, plus the gasoline it took to get the RV down there. So, you gotta take some of that into consideration. You really don't have to, because one thing that my wife and I really, really like about our RV is we've got all of our stuff in the RV. We're not having to drag suitcases in and out. We're not having to, worry about going out to eat all the time because, we've got our food inside. If we want a snack for lunch, we don't have to go out. And we really enjoy traveling that way. Plus, it just makes it a lot more leisurely. You don't have to worry about, we got this place booked from, Tuesday to Thursday, and then we're going to go, this next place, and we got to book this place, from Friday to Monday or something like that. It makes it a lot easier because most of your RV spots, until it comes to the weekend, they're fairly flexible with you. We've only been a couple of times when they said, we got a lot of people coming in this weekend and you're going to have to move out of the spot you're in and we're going to have to move you back over here. That did happen to us once, so you got to be careful of that. But RVing is a different way to travel. Whether you have a trailer or a motorhome, it's pretty enjoyable, but it's not as cost effective, I wouldn't say, as it used to be. And number 4 is one that we kind of looked at very, very briefly was, do we want to stay here and is this where we want to live? Or do we want to cash out of the house we're in and go buy that dream house? And, that could make a lot of sense, but for us it really didn't because our house isn't worth, a ton of money. So it's not like we could cash out of this house and, run down to South Texas or something like that and buy a really nice new home. We would end up financing that home, and then we would have another payment. And that's the last thing we really wanted, was another payment. Now, back about 10 years ago when we bought our motorhome, that was our plan. We had decided at that point that when we got to the retirement age, that we were going to go ahead and stay in this location. Well, most of the reason for that is because our kids at that time, and still today, live around here. Yeah, they're still all around here, so we don't want to move. We don't want to move away from all of our grandkids. So when we want to take off, we're going to jump in our motorhome, or we're going to run down south for a week or two and kind of get away from the cold weather. So that's kind of what we decided to do back about 10 years ago. And so far it's working out pretty good for us. But you can really sink a significant amount of your money and time and effort and everything else into buying that dream home. Because you may be able to buy that dream home, you may be able to buy it in cash, but it may be a little bit more of a fixer-upper. And maybe that's what you want to do in retirement. Maybe you want that project. I don't know. Personally, I did all my projects, built my big shop and did all that kind of stuff when I was in my late 40s and early 50s. And I kind of got that out of my system, and everything was to prepare for retirement. So I pretty much got it now. I don't need any more projects. You may want to buy more of a fixer-upper type home, and spend those, first few years going ahead and project managing and getting that home just the way you want it. We actually have some friends of ours who they didn't move or anything. I mean, they're just moving across town, but they're building this big barn-dominium. I mean, this house is gonna be gorgeous. It's huge. And they're spending a real good portion of their retirement on building this new house. But they are really happy for it. It's what they wanted to do. They talked to their financial guy when they went into it, so they're going into it with their eyes open, and financially it's not going to hurt them any. So, I say go for it. And they're really, I won't say they're having a good time getting it built, but they are getting it built. Okay, the next one, I've never dabbled in, but going out and getting a timeshare. The reason I've never done it is they've got kind of a negative connotation to them from the people that I know who have them. Now, they use them and, they don't feel like they got ripped off or anything like that, but it just kind of limits what they can do. And again, I'll go back to the Airbnb Vrbo thing right now. You can go out, if you're not looking to get a big luxury home and you're not traveling with, 4 or 5 or 6 people, you can get a really, really good deal on an Airbnb or something like that. It may not be big, it may not be fancy, but it's going to be pretty nice. But I would go into purchasing a timeshare with my eyes open about what I wanted to do and how I'm going to use that. Because that may it may not be for you. It might be perfectly fine. That may be something you really want to do. Maybe you like to spend, a week in Las Vegas every year. Maybe you want to spend, a week snow skiing in Vail, something like that, and you're going to buy a timeshare there. Perfect. Go for it. But for me and my wife, we like traveling more to the not so much resort places, I guess you could say. So this next one is fancy cars. And when I say fancy cars, I don't mean a classic car that, you know, is going to build value, or even, you know, something that if you put money into it, you're going to get that money back. And I'm not talking about a Toyota Camry, something that's going to depreciate but hold its value fairly well. I'm talking about the fancy convertibles, you know, the big SUVs, things like that. Things that once you buy them, they're going to start depreciating, I mean, drastically the minute you buy them. And I'm not going to take away from the fact that having a fancy car could be a lot of fun. I could just imagine, you know, having a really nice, like when we bought our Jeep. A Jeep isn't a fancy car, but it depreciates fairly fast, although they do hold their value. But this Jeep Wrangler, for all practical purposes, it doesn't have many. You know, it's a little bit of a rough ride. It doesn't get great gas mileage. You know, you can't fit a lot in it. You can't fit very many people in it. It is great for off-roading, and the reason that we bought it basically to flat tow behind our motorhome. So it did have a defined purpose for us, but I would put it in that fancy car mode. You know, we don't put a lot of miles on it. It's not something that I would, if we didn't have a motorhome, I probably would never buy one. You know, for our ATV and our off-roading, I've got a RZR and a Ranger, and you know, those are both Polaris ATV or UTVs, utility terrain vehicles. Is that what that is? UTV? Anyway, we've got those for when we want to go off-roading. So I personally, if we didn't have the motorhome, I would probably would not buy a Jeep Wrangler. But I will admit, it is a lot of fun to drive. It's a lot of fun to drive off-road. There's no doubt about that. I've taken it out and done a little testing with it, and it's a blast. But is it worth what I paid for it? No, it is not. So if I were to do it all over again, here's some guidelines that I would tell myself. And you know, the biggest one is the last one. And I'll go ahead and I'll just start out with that is, if I buy it, can I sell it? And that's my problem, is once I buy something, then I have that ownership, and I have a real problem with that. Once I own something, I do not want to sell it or give it away. You know, I want to keep it. And I'm really bad about that. And so that's one of the guidelines. If you're that type of person like me, you know, buying a lot of different things in retirement is something that you want to go into it with your eyes open and say, you know what, I'm going to use this for a few years, but I probably just go ahead and sell it when I'm done, when I've had my fun with it. I'm going to go ahead and sell that off. All right, so number one is, you know, because some of these, like buying a dream house or something like that, how will it affect my retirement plan? In other words, will I have to give up something to, you know, buy this house? Am I going to have to give up, you know, some of my vacationing and my bucket list items to go ahead and purchase this house? So how will it affect my retirement plan? If I buy a timeshare, is it going to affect me to where, you know, again, I don't have as much money in my monthly budget as what I think I'm going to need? I don't have that cushion anymore. The second thing is, how much enjoyment will it bring? Now, for most of these, it's probably going to bring a lot of enjoyment to you. So that's not so much. But on the third thing is, how much maintenance and how much time do I have to spend on these items, taking care of them? How much is it going to cost to have somebody take care of them for me? You know, those are things you need to look at, and you need to have your eyes open when you make those purchases. And like I mentioned, how much will I use it and how much will I enjoy it? So you know what? I hope this video's helped you out, and if it has, I'd appreciate it if you'd reach down, hit that like button, and watch this video next.